Hey everybody, I'm Will Garcia.
And I'm Josh Earl.
And we're the Hoops Guys. And to continue our 2014-15 NBA team previews, today Josh and I will be talking about the Phoenix Suns. How'd they do, Josh?
As well as you can do and still miss the playoffs in the West. They finished 48-34, which would have had them sitting pretty nice if they were in the Eastern Conference. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, in the West, they were on the outside looking in, finishing in that 8th spot.
Yeah.
But despite the missing out on the playoffs, a lot of good things happened for this team last year.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of those good things started on the offensive end. This is a team that ranked 8th in offensive rating, and that's because they took a lot of high-value shots and made them. So that wouldn't be too surprising for them to be 8th in XPPS, awesome stat by Ian Levy, expected points per shot, that looks at where your shots are coming from, and 7th in actual points per shot.
And then on top of it, they were also 7th in effective field goal percentage too. So and they didn't really take a lot of the least valuable shots. At least statistically speaking, those being mid-range jumpers. They finished 8th in mid-range true shot attempts, which is another element of Nylon Calculus's XPPS stats.
Yep.
Ian Levy, you're awesome.
Yep.
So
link in the description on those.
Yes. Instead of taking mid-range shots, they sought out the more valuable three-point shots. Mm-hmm. They were 4th in corner 3 shot attempts, tied for 7th in corner 3 field goal percentage, and they were 9th in above-the-break 3-point attempts. They also converted around the rim pretty well, finishing 7th in restricted area field goal percentage.
Yeah.
And on top of all of that, they also got to the free throw line pretty well, as evidenced by them finishing tied for 11th in free throw per field goal attempt.
Yeah, and they had a lot of good stuff going on for them defensively, too. They were exactly average in defensive rating, so whatever. But they did force opponent turnovers. They were 10th in turnover percentage on defense.
Yeah, and then defensively, they also really focused on preventing corner threes, and it worked really well for them. Mm-hmm. They finished tied for 7th in corner 3 true shot attempts by the opponents, as well as 5th in defensive field goal percentage from corner 3. And they were also tied for 5th in above-the-break 3-point field goal percentage for opponents. And obviously, this led to a pretty solid defense of the three-point line overall.
Yeah. Speaking of the three-point line, one guy in particular named Goran Dragic kind of killed it from there last year. He had one of the best seasons of last year out of anybody. A lot of people were expecting him to take a bit of a jump forward, but I don't think anybody was expecting this.
Probably not.
He put up 20 and 6 on 60% true shooting. That's like LeBron range.
Yeah.
It's like KD range in terms of efficiency. And in addition to shooting hot fire from the three-point line.
Dylon.
Exactly. 41%. He was also an above-average finisher, 57% in the restricted area, and did very well at breaking down the defense and creating shots for himself and his teammates. The guy, as we all know, got totally snubbed from the All-Star team, but he more than earned his Most Improved Player award and his All-NBA third-team selection. A-plus year for Goran Dragic.
Yes. He was, of course, joined in the Phoenix Suns' two-point guard backcourt by Eric Bledsoe, who finally got an opportunity to be a full-time starter.
I didn't know he had this kind of a year in him.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, knee injuries kept him to just 43 games this year. But in those 43 games, he had a breakout year. He saw career highs in games started, minutes per game with 32.9, field goal percentage 47.7%, defensive rebound rate 13.8%, which for a guard is pretty impressive. 27% assist rate, which is career high. He had a career low turnover rate at just 17.8, which doesn't sound that great, but anytime it's going down, career-wise, that's good, especially in such a fast-paced system. And, of course, a career-high 19.4 points per 36 minutes. And all of this came on, by far, his highest usage rate of his career to date at 24.9%. So between him and Goran, they formed one hell of a two-pronged point guard attack that was pretty much unparalleled in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of unparalleled in the league, one guy who actually isn't that is Gerald Green.
I don't know. His leaping ability might be unparalleled in the
Wiggins
league.
Came in.
Dude, Gerald Green is like crazy elevation.
He does, but so is Wiggins. I don't know. But either way, this guy is a Phoenix Sun because if he jumped in the air, he could probably touch the actual sun.
He'd get burned, yeah.
He'd get burned. But he had a really effective year last year, all joking and rambling aside. He averaged 15 points per game, was a very effective high-volume perimeter shooter. He took 6 threes a game at 40% clip. So that's
very
awesome.
Good. Yeah.
He had a career-high 59% true shooting, and a lot of that's just from taking smarter shots. And for him, taking smarter shots was just part of him. The whole theme of his year was just playing smarter basketball.
Yeah, he's definitely grown a lot since he came into the league with Boston.
Yeah, he used to be a league leader in face palms per 48, but now he's doing a lot better in that regard. And I think a lot of that, and he's mentioned this too, his time in Russia and China and in the D-League, he really had to... Earlier in his career, he was just an athlete. That's kind of what he relied on. But now he's an adept shooter, especially. And he's grown exponentially as a basketball player.
Yeah.
And it continued last year.
Yeah. Another person who seemingly grew by leaps and bounds as a basketball player, at least statistically, was Miles Plumlee, a.k.a. Plum Dog Millionaire.
Yeah.
Phoenix gave him a chance to shine, and he had a career year across the board. He saw massive jumps in games played, games started, field goal percentage. He jumped from 23.8 field goal percentage to 51.7%.
Holy cow.
His offensive, defense, and total rebounds per game all improved greatly. And his scoring per game went from less than 1 point per game. In Indy to 8.1 in Phoenix. So between him and Gerald Green and the dynamic backcourt of Bledsoe and Dragic,
career years from everybody.
It was across the board. But not everything went well with them last year.
No, and one of the big things that didn't go so well for them was their turnovers. This is a team that was 21st in turnover percentage. And, when you have such a fast-paced system that you have going on, mistakes will be made.
Yep.
But that was a problem. And then while they converted their shots at the rim, and they made and took a lot of threes, they didn't get a lot of shots in the paint, which the field goal percentage on a shot in the paint compared to like a mid-range shot, it's actually pretty similar, but those shots also tend to generate fouls more often.
Yep.
So that's kind of the value to that. And they weren't getting those.
Yeah, and then on the defensive side, they didn't really crash the glass very well. They finished 22nd in defensive rebound rate. And on top of that, they had a tendency to kind of bail opponents out last year by sending them to the free throw line. And they wound up ranking 26th in defensive free throw per field goal attempt.
Yeah, and another thing they struggled with was giving up shots at the rim. This is a team that was 23rd in restricted area true shooting attempts defensively and 25th in the paint attempts defensively. So allowing opponents into the paint and near the rim was likely why they forced opponents into only the 20th most of the statistically lowest value shots from the mid-range. They didn't force teams into many mid-range jumpers.
Yeah, well, the opponents had no reason to shoot mid-range jumpers if they could get to the rim or in the paint. So yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't just everybody almost across the board had career years, But there was one guy who kind of didn't get a chance to live up to any sort of expectations of him, and that was Alex Len, the 5th overall pick in the 2013 draft. Unfortunately, he was only able to play in 42 games last year due to some ankle injuries. And while he's a very, very promising young big man, he really hasn't had the opportunity to show any of that promise really on the NBA level yet due to his injuries. In fact, he had to be out for the last portion of the preseason because he broke his finger.
Yeah. Yeah. You saw him in the tape, and I think it was his pinky he broke.
Yep.
Yeah. So that wasn't good. But one thing that was good was that this team was able to sign Isaiah Thomas on a steal of a contract.
Heck yes. Both of us are big Isaiah fans.
Yeah. Like a handful of other players on this Suns roster, Isaiah Thomas had a career year last year. He put up like 20 and 6. Funnily enough, get this. Every year Isaiah Thomas has played, he's had a 57.4% true shooting percentage.
That's pretty crazy.
You don't
generally see that type of consistency on such a measure.
Exactly. But yeah, so he put up 20 and 6. And the thing I'm always impressed with Isaiah Thomas is his finishing ability.
Yep.
The guy's like 5'9". They say he's a $180. But he's an elite finisher. He shot 68% in the restricted area. Roy Hibbert can't even do that.
Yeah, I actually think his size is a big reason why he is such a good finisher, because he's had to deliberately practice finishing against taller guys his entire life.
Yeah, because pretty much everybody's a taller guy.
Yeah. Speaking of a tall guy, they also added Anthony Tolliver, who was kind of like a stretch big, somewhat for the Hornets. Well, the now Hornets. They were the Bobcats, last year. He shot it really well from 3, and I think the thought process is he might be able to mitigate any drop-off from one of the losses they had this offseason in Channing Frye's departure.
Yep.
But, yeah, Tolliver should be an interesting option off the bench. Another couple of interesting options off the bench are a couple of the Suns' draft picks this year.
Yeah.
So they drafted TJ Warren.
Yep.
Who's got this really interesting type of game you don't really see that much anymore, at least on the NBA level. He's got one of those old school crafty mid-range type games.
Yeah.
And it worked for him a lot in college last year. He was one of the best scorers in the NCAA. And given how modern defenses are actively trying to force teams into mid-range opportunities, having a player who's especially adept and dangerous from there can be very, very advantageous.
Absolutely.
And so I like that TJ Warren pickup by them.
I did too.
Yeah. They also picked up a guy who's probably going to be spending a fair amount of time with their D-League affiliate, just because of the names he will be backing up. But Tyler Ennis, the point guard from Syracuse.
Yep.
Really strong offensive orchestrator and facilitator, a guy who's able to run your offense, get guys good looks, isn't necessarily really a major scoring threat himself.
No.
Not that dissimilar in skill set to, say, Kendall Marshall, who the Suns had drafted previously. And like Kendall, he's probably going to have to show himself to be a threat from deep, or a particularly adept dribble penetrator to get any sort of playing time in this crowded Suns backcourt.
Yeah. A guy who I think might be able to get playing time, but also probably winds up in the D-League, Alec Brown.
Yeah,
Alec Brown was one of my guys going into this draft.
It's true. Will talked about him a lot.
Yeah. Alec Brown's really interesting because he's a legit 7'1", like actually a little over 7'1". It's like 7'1.5". And he's a rim protector. He can block shots. He did it very well for Green Bay last year. Small school guy. He averaged 2.8 blocks per game. But what's surprising about Alec Brown is that he shot 45% from 3 on a little over 3.5 attempts per game. And he has a release like a guard. It isn't a slow release. It's a quick release. So when you couple a fast release from a guy like that, who has a 9'1" standing reach and is over 7 feet tall, it's almost an unblockable shot, and he can get it off really quick.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing he struggled with was rebounding. He only got a little over 5 boards per game in college. But the Suns got themselves kind of what we call a purple squirrel, in that he's a rim-protecting stretch big.
Which is kind of like proverbial catnip for Will and I. We particularly are drawn, for some reason, to bigs who not only can protect the rim, but space out to the three-point line, too. So
absolutely. It neutralizes the other team's rim protector in a way, because it forces them to come away from the basket. So that's huge. And he, skill set wise, I'm not going to come out and say he's as good as Channing Frye right now. No. But skill set wise, I think he's closer to Frye than Tolliver is. Because of that fast release.
I think long term, Brown might be the Channing Frye approximation guy.
And they got him at pick 50.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Another guy they were able to pick up this off season, and it's kind of somewhat synergistic because they already have a pair of brothers on the roster in the Morai, or the Morris twins. They actually picked up Goran Dragic, his brother.
Yeah, they picked up Zoran Dragic.
Yeah.
Zoran's more of a wing. Goran's more of like a 1. But Zoran's a really good off-ball threat, and he can create out of the pick and roll pretty well as pass out of it. During the Slovenian national team, I don't know if you saw him in the World Cup, played there with his brother. He really was one of the best players there.
Yeah. Another guy who could be found at the World Cup was Serbian Bogdan Bogdanovic.
That's an awesome name.
Yes, it is. He's a very promising off-ball threat with some on-ball skills, but the 27th overall pick in this draft won't be coming over to the Suns this year, so it'll be at least a season before the Suns get a chance to check him out. Unfortunately, there's another player that the Suns won't be able to check out this year, and he's kind of a fan favorite, and in my opinion, one of the most vital pieces of that Suns' successful year last year, Channing Frye.
Yes.
He, of course, signed with Orlando. There are maybe 3 big men in the NBA who are as or more feared from 3 than Channing Frye.
Dirk,
and those guys
Love,
are
who?
Dirk, Love, and Ryan Anderson.
Gotcha,
those are the only 3 big men that have anywhere near the type of gravitational pull as Channing Frye spotting up from 3. And kind of like what you said about Alec Brown skill set wise, is it's the same reason, it's the same thing with Channing Frye, and a big reason why he's so valuable as a stretch big is he's one of the few stretch bigs who has, outside of those other 3 mentioned guys, is he can not only shoot at a higher than average percentage on a high volume from 3, but he combines a really high release point, like Alec Brown, with a very quick release. So it makes it very tough as a closeout defender to actually contest that or kind of throw any kind of stress at him. And his gravity, I think, was actually a very significant piece in opening up the driving lanes for Dragic and Bledsoe, and especially in pick and rolls. And I don't think it's going to be easily replaced. And I think both the Dragon and Bledsoe are going to have slightly less efficient years this year simply because Channing Frye is not on the court to open things up more for them.
Yeah. Speaking of less efficient years and former big-time pieces of Suns teams, Leandro Barbosa is gone.
Yeah.
He only played 20 games with the Suns team last year, and he struggled shooting from deep in those 20 games. But you have to take sample size into account. The guy's still a good shooter.
Oh, yeah.
And he can still penetrate, even if he's not quite the Brazilian Blur anymore.
Yeah.
He can still be the Brazilian pretty fast.
Yeah, he's blur-ish.
He's bleh.
Oddly enough, somebody who is also sometimes referred to as bleh, Ish Smith. His numbers aren't that great, and most people probably don't know who he is. But a large part of that is because he was the third string point guard behind Dragic and Bledsoe. So he didn't really get much playing time when both of those guys were playing. And, he was solid, though, as a third string and a backup when pressured into bigger minutes because of injuries. But given their backcourt rotation right now and the fact they brought in Isaiah Thomas and even Tyler Ennis, it's not like Ish Smith was going to get much playing time this year anyway. So
so if you've been watching our team previews, Josh and I both made a stat. We didn't both make one together, but we have separate stats we both made individually. We talk about them a bit. My stat's called Possession Delta, and it's way less dorky than it actually sounds, or maybe it's as dorky as it sounds. I don't know.
I think you made it sound dorkier than it probably is.
The name is really dorky. I'll need to work on that. I need to get like a branding consultant.
Nothing wrong with it being dorky.
Okay. But it's basically the amount of possessions, which is like shot attempts and turnovers, that they gave up during the off season through like free agencies or like by waiving people. Compared to what they brought in. So the possession delta for the Phoenix Suns is 4.8, and that means that they have a surplus of 4.8 possessions. That doesn't mean all that much.
No, there'll probably be some change in a couple of people's roles.
Isaiah Thomas.
Isaiah Thomas will see a reduction. Gerald Green is another guy who's going to see a significant reduction probably.
Yeah.
Because Isaiah Thomas, Bledsoe, and Dragic are going to dominate the backcourt minutes. So Gerald won't be getting as many two-guard minutes this season. And, a couple other guys probably will get slightly smaller roles, where a few might even increase their roles a little bit.
Maybe, yeah.
Markieff Morris will probably get... Yeah. But, yeah, it's not a huge change, really, when you factor in that the bulk of those are coming from Isaiah Thomas, and he's going to be shifting back to a backup role where he's still going to play a lot of minutes, but his shot attempts aren't going to be as much as they were with Sacramento.
Yeah, so speaking of things that don't really do all that much, what's their rest differential looking like?
Well, rest differential I think could mean important things, but for them it's not a big deal because it's only at 1. And rest differential is just a stat I came up with to kind of look at how a team is doing over the course of the season in terms of rest compared to their opponents. So how many road back-to-backs, how many 3 games in 4 nights, how many 4 games in 5 nights are they playing during the season compared to their opponents over the course of the season. And a rest differential of 1 means over the course of the season, they'll probably be slightly more rested than their opponents.
Yeah, like 1 fewer back-to-back.
Yeah, so it's not going to be that impactful. Something that is at least impactful in our previews, in that it's something we find fun and we also think is something a little more fun for the viewers, is our section we call 5 questions, which is pretty straightforward. Will and I have 5 questions about this team that we go back and forth asking each other about in order to cover some of the stuff that we might not have covered otherwise.
Absolutely.
So, Will, hit me up with
speaking of things
the
that are
first
very
question.
impactful, since that's the topic of discussion is impactful things, let's talk a bit about Channing Frye.
Yes.
How will the loss of Channing Frye affect the Suns' half-court offense this year?
It's definitely going to impact it. They have guys in Markieff and Tolliver who are capable 3-point threats. They're not particularly perceived or respected 3-point threats by the defense, which is going to be the problem. But they are going to be able to knock down a fair number of the threes that they get.
Yep.
But Channing Frye was so valuable for them last year. You mentioned, both of us talked about how Bledsoe and Dragic both had career years.
Yeah.
And a large part of that was they had a pick-and-pop roll man to run pick and rolls with that the defense could not leave. And even if he wasn't running the pick and roll with them, as a spot-up threat, with that quick release and that release point and that three-point accuracy, Frye opened up a lot of things for the Suns' offense.
Absolutely.
And while Markieff and Tolliver and Alec Brown, if he gets any playing time this year, which Will and I hope he does, but he probably won't. Without, those guys will help mitigate it to a degree, but the Suns' offense, especially in the half court, is going to be a little tighter this year.
Yep.
The driving lanes and passing lanes aren't going to be as open as they were before, which is definitely going to be reflected in the point guards' efficiency numbers this season.
Yeah, you took all the words right out of my mouth, so I guess we should just get into the second question.
Yes.
How will the backcourt rotation play out with Goran Dragic, Eric Bledsoe, Isaiah Thomas, Gerald Green, Zoran, Tyler Ennis, and Archie Goodwin?
It's mostly going to be a three-way timeshare, I think, between
Agreed.
Goran, Eric, and Isaiah. I think Gerald and Zoran can get some small forward minutes.
Yep.
Ennis and Goodwin are probably going to spend a lot of time with the D-League affiliate and with the player development coaches in Phoenix. Shout out to my friend Irving Rowland. You rock, my friend. Keep doing good work. He's a player development coach for the Phoenix Suns.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so keep doing good work, buddy. It's showing. So, yeah, I think...
Tell Alec Brown I said he's awesome.
Yeah. I think the main three guards are going to be Goran, Bledsoe, and Isaiah. So those guys are going to dominate those 96 minutes, and anything else is just going to be scraps for the rest. They'll have to get minutes elsewhere if they want to get big minutes.
Agreed.
Yeah. Speaking of... getting big minutes this year. Do you think it's possible that Alex Len might get some big minutes this year and be able to show why he was a top 5 pick?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Between him and Plum Dog, that's gonna be. You can't even call him his real name. It's such a cool name.
It has to be Plum Dog
It has
Millionaire.
to be Plum Dog.
Yeah.
Like his full name is Plum Dog Millionaire. That's what it should be.
Birth
like his social
certificate.
security, birth certificate, social security card,
Passport. All that.
That's his name. But in all seriousness, it'll be a bit of a dogfight. No pun intended. Pun very intended. Alex Len's a big dude. He's really mobile. He's
when he doesn't have ankle injuries.
Yeah, but he's mobile when he's not in a cast. It'll be interesting to see if he can get some good minutes and what he can do with it. Really, I don't even have that much of an opinion on him because the dude didn't play.
Yeah, he's one of the guys I was pretty high on from a skill set standpoint heading into that 2013 draft.
What do you like about him?
Well, he's a very capable rebounder, rim protector, post scorer.
Yes.
All in all, he was actually more well-rounded as a center prospect overall than Nerlens Noel was. The problem is he's a 7-footer who has now had multiple lower limb, specifically ankle foot range injuries.
Yeah.
And speaking as somebody who grew up in the Portland area in Oregon, that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I'm very afraid of 7-footers who have lower limb injuries. I think if he can stay healthy, he'll be in a timeshare with Plum Dog. so he'll be able to get minutes. If he's healthy, I think he can show at least glimpses of why the Suns were willing to use the 5th pick overall on him.
Yeah, he's still like 21, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. They're cool with it.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about the backcourt rotation, but how is the small forward rotation going to work out when you have Gerald Green, PJ Tucker, and Marcus Morris all having fairly legitimate claims to big minutes there?
Yeah.
So, Will, who winds up winning the starting spot, and who winds up getting the shaft?
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I don't really know. The thing with PJ Tucker, I remember last year, and what I saw, they sometimes played him a bit as a super, super, super small ball 4.
Yeah, in some lineups, yeah.
Yeah, so they'll probably get some minutes there. You can do the same with Marcus. So they're both more versatile than Gerald Green. Well, I shouldn't say that because Gerald Green can also go down to the 2.
Yeah,
but the 2
but
is
of course
pretty, the 2 is pretty full.
Yeah.
So I think that the way this roster is constructed lends itself to Tucker and Morris getting the most of the minutes. Having said that, Green did have a really good year last year. So I'm not sure. I'm thinking that they probably lean towards Tucker or Marcus to start, and that Gerald Green's probably going to be a little lower on the totem pole. But I think it's going to be pretty. They'll all be in like the same bracket.
Yeah, I think it'll be mostly. It'll be somewhat akin to the Plum Dog Millionaire Alex Lynn timeshare, where everyone's kind of getting roughly around the same minutes.
20-ish.
I think PJ Tucker is likely to start the season as the starter.
Yeah.
With Gerald and Marcus being more bench guys, especially considering their flexibility, able to play. Marcus can play a little 4, Gerald can play a little 2 in minutes. So I think that's how it'll play out. And like we said, I don't think anybody's really going to necessarily, barring injury or a severe drop-off, kind of be getting the short end or shaft of the minutes. Yeah.
So you're the bigger CBA sort of free agency guy than I am. So I've got a bit of a question for you. So even after Eric Bledsoe's pretty big extension or new contract, the Suns only have $43 million on the books for next offseason.
Assuming you don't count Goran Dragic's
player option?
Well, his cap hold.
Oh, okay, yeah. So aside from the obvious re-signing of Dragic, do you think there's anyone that they may be targeting? I mean, like, what sort of numbers will they even have to work with? Because you're right about that cap hold with the bird rights.
Yeah, I don't think they'll have that much.
But like 6 or 7?
They won't have enough to go after, like, a max
Marc Gasol.
guy. No, they won't have enough to go after a max type guy.
But is there anybody that you say like 6 or 7 million range?
Maybe, but it kind of depends on who's available. The one area I think they'd be... they're definitely going to strive to re-sign Goran. There's no question.
Absolutely.
They wouldn't bring his brother in and then let him walk.
Surprised we just wanted your brother. We used you as a recruitment tool to get your brother.
Yeah, exactly.
But I put our plan worked. A game.
Yes, our plan worked. So I think the focus is going to be him this next offseason in terms of free agency and getting him signed. That said, if there is a rim protector and like an actual rim protector that's going to move the needle more than Plum Dog or Alex Len will this season, and that might be in that price range, they'll go for them. But nobody's really going to be in that price range that has that skill set. DeAndre Jordan's going to be getting a lot of money.
Ashik probably going to get a little more.
Is going to be getting well over. We'll be getting at least $10 million a year. Maybe if they have some. Well, actually, no. That wouldn't matter because the Bucks probably would have cap space too. I was going to say maybe they could try using any extra cap space to facilitate a trade to bring in a guy like a Larry Sanders, but Milwaukee probably doesn't do that, and honestly, Phoenix probably doesn't either. Robert Sarver is really big on character. It's part of the reason why Beasley was kicked out as soon as the news hit about the legal issue.
Yeah.
And he was also, and historically speaking, the Suns organization is also very high on that, in that, you know, when Jason Kidd first had the spousal abuse stuff in Phoenix, they almost immediately traded him to New Jersey. So they wouldn't be interested in a guy like Larry Sanders, but Larry Sanders might be the only guy that would fill that role at a high level that would be likely be available. So
I mean, unless like a guy unless they want to go like a tier down into like the Dalembert category.
Dalembert is not a good option yet.
I agree. I'm thinking they might be looking like wing, or maybe like a 4. They're gonna do something with that money.
The thing is, they already have a lot of depth, which we just addressed. If they do have cap space and they're looking to go after anybody, I'm thinking it might not actually be a free agent thing. I think it might be a consolidation trade wherein they take on more salary than they send out.
That'd be cool.
I think that might be the play if a good enough player is available that would entice them to do so.
Right on. So speaking of the play, our next play is to go into our 20-50-80, which is our predictions we like to do. We do a prediction that we think is 20% likely, 50% likely, and 80% likely to happen. That lets us say crazy stuff that kind of makes sense, stuff that's probably going to happen, and a bunch of stuff in between. So, Josh, take us away with your predictions, man.
So, he finished last year second in votes, but expectations will be higher this year. So, I think it's 20% likely that Jeff Hornacek, who, by the way, was a completely underrated player, barely missed the 50-40-90 club several times by just like a percentage point or so. Crazy good as a player, but also crazy good as a coach.
Yeah.
And I think it's 20% likely that he actually winds up winning Coach of the Year this year. I think it's possible because expectations will be higher. He finished second last year, and this team should the Channing Frye thing is going to hurt, but hopefully more healthy Eric Bledsoe and the addition of Isaiah Thomas should help them win a couple more games, which would put them in the playoffs in the tough Western Conference, which if they can make the playoffs under these higher expectations, I think he's got a decent shot at winning Coach of the Year. Problem is, there's a lot of other good coaches out there. So
yeah, a lot of other good coaches and a lot of other good teams. You kind of just alluded to it, but how likely do you think it is that this team makes the playoffs in the Western Conference?
I think it's 50-50. It's tough because I think there are some teams in the West right now that a single injury could completely drop them out of the playoffs, and we're talking all great teams. The top 8 teams in the West last year are really, really damn good.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of them that they don't have quite the depth where if their top guy goes down, they can sustain well enough in the West to make the playoffs. So I think the potential to kind of break that playoff ceiling and get in is definitely there for the Suns, but it's a very, very tough Western Conference, you got to factor in other teams that didn't make the playoffs last year are going to be better. The Nuggets are getting back Danilo Gallinari. They got Afflalo back. Ty probably won't miss as much time. Even JaVale's coming back. They'll have but they'll have more bodies, and they'll be able to hopefully play at a better winning rate. Another team, the Pelicans, they added Omer Asik. So they have a
and Ryan
chance
Anderson's
to
be healthy, hopefully.
Yeah, and Rhino should be healthy. Their wings had some injury issues last year too, and they should be healthy this year too. So they're another team that could be in the playoff hunt. So
yeah, that
50-50 is pretty good when you're talking Western Conference playoffs, and I'm high on the Suns.
Yeah, that Memphis, Denver, New Orleans, Houston, Phoenix. That's sort of like the...
Oh, Memphis is better than all of those ones, though.
It's close.
They are.
They're good, but it's another kind of thing where you said, like, the one injury, Marc Gasol down.
Yeah, but that's still not quite as
down.
bad as, say, Steph or Bogut going down for Golden State, or Dwight or James Harden going down for Houston. I mean, I get your point. I just think Memphis is really good. They have a really good shot at actually being a home court advantage in the first round in the West,
okay.
I think.
That's bold.
Yeah. Speaking of bold, and in this case, the opposite, I think it's 80% likely that the Suns won't get slept on this year. Last year, everyone, and even their moms who don't watch basketball, were saying that the Suns were going to suck, and they were going to purposely tank, and they were going to get a top pick and, run with Wiggins or throw Jabari out there, or
scandal for Randall, embarrassing for the Harrisons. I remember that.
They're not gonna get that this year. No. Teams are gonna be aware of them, and also expectations are gonna be higher.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree, and that will definitely play a role in whether or not this team can make the playoffs.
Yeah.
In the way they're being scouted, they're actually being taken a little more seriously now.
Yep.
So I think you're absolutely right with that.
Another reason they might make the playoffs this year is the guy behind your 20% likely.
Pizza Man. The Pizza
Yes.
Boy. Isaiah Thomas. I think it's 20% likely he wins Sixth Man of the Year.
I concur.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other guys that could...
you have like Todd.
Make it tough.
Jamal Crawford, who could read.
Jamal Crawford always puts up enough points where he's going to be in the discussion.
There are other really good
Manu.
Manu, of course. Yeah, how can you forget Manu?
Yep.
So there are always really good... Ryan Anderson.
Yep.
Holy cow.
Yep.
So there are a lot of guys who could win it, but Isaiah Thomas is one of them. I think he's going to get the minutes. He played off the bench for a little while in Sacramento, and he put up decent numbers. I think it was around like 17 and 5.
Yeah, he generally outplayed the starting point guard from off the bench
every year he's been.
And they kept trying to make him someone else be the starting point guard, and he kept winning the role.
Now it's depressing.
Yeah, well, at least in Phoenix, even if he's in a backup role, he's going to be playing starters minutes.
Yep, or at least really close to it.
Yes.
Speaking of starters, I think that's 50% likely that Goran Dragic or Eric Bledsoe makes the All-Star team this year.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be one of the two. It could happen. Like, I'd put Dragic's odds a little higher than Bledsoe's.
Yeah.
Just because Dragic scores more points.
Although Bledsoe is thought of pretty highly around the league.
He is.
And if he's actually healthy, he'll probably put up pretty nice numbers himself.
Like those 17, 5, and 5 kind of thing, maybe.
That was last year. I think if he's healthy, he'll be a little closer to the 20-point-a-game type threshold. That'd
be interesting. Yeah. I don't know. One thing I do know for almost certain that the three guys I mentioned, IT, Dragic, and Bledsoe, that rotation is going to be a success.
Oh, yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if they play some minutes of all three of them on the court at the same time.
Yeah, Bledsoe has a pretty long wingspan.
Yeah.
So he can guard
play
some threes.
Some small minutes against a not particularly imposing small forward.
Yeah, he's not guarding LeBron. Mini LeBron isn't taking full-size LeBron.
No. Or KD.
Or KD, right. But, I mean, there are some small forwards he can take.
Oh, definitely.
So they can work that in some games. And I think that the rotation in general, the minutes are going to be staggered. And the one thing I love about what they did here is, it's like the way they did things, it makes so much, like, we mentioned how much cap space they're going to have, and they're going to have some cap space. This is the sort of thing that's so crazy is that a guy like Bledsoe, who can create off the bounce and play awesome defense, but is mostly a really good facilitator and really good at making his own shot, is going to be making about as much money as a guy like Klay Thompson, who also plays really good defense, but can't do either of those two things. So what Phoenix kind of did here, and the way I see it, is either intentional or not, there's a serious financial...
It was intentional.
Okay. There's a serious financial reason for them to be stocking up on all of these point guards when a guy who can create off the dribble and, like, go check a ruler is, like, this much shorter, not much, can do all these things, and you can play them together. You get much more offensive versatility because these guys are good ball handlers, are good facilitators, and they can create for themselves.
Yeah. It's somewhat of an institutional thing.
Yeah. And it winds up being way cheaper.
The Suns in the late 80s, early 90s did the exact same thing with the Suns' current head coach, Jeff Hornacek, paired with Kevin Johnson.
Yep.
People forget that Jeff Hornacek used to be a point guard.
Yep.
He was the point guard until they brought in Kevin Johnson, and then he switched to the two. So it's something that, the Suns as an organization have done before, and obviously the coach has been involved in such a scenario. So I think they actively, that was a big part of the plan.
Yeah,
and I think keeping them together and using a significant portion of their salary cap space on that backcourt rotation, those core three guys, I think it is definitely a big part of their plan on running with those 2 point guard lineups, which thankfully, because Bledsoe and Dragic are the size they are, they can play the two defensively on most guys.
Yep.
And that will allow them to have an additional ball handler, dribble penetrator guy who is a good facilitator and a strong decision maker who can push the pace in transition if he gets the outlet, and can also play off ball, both half court and transition. Having guys like that, having multiple ones like that, allows you to move the ball from strong to weak side very well, and allow whoever catches it on the weak side to then attack right away, whether it's attacking the closeout defender or running a quick pick and roll.
Yeah, and to get a player who can do what a guy like Bledsoe or Dragic or even Isaiah Thomas can do, who's a traditional shooting guard, it would have been so much more, and it probably wouldn't even be financially possible.
No.
So that's how I feel about that rotation. But how do you feel about this team? Do you think they're going to be good?
Yeah, I think they're going to be good, but you know me, I'm very big on, are you asking the right question? Yeah. They're going to be good, but the right question is, will they be good enough in an extremely tight Western Conference playoff race? And that's the question the Suns are going to be trying to answer this year. And I think they could be, but they're going to have to stay healthy, and they're going to have to really, really come up with some sort of approximation of that Channing Frye space, or at least address it in some other way systematically to continue getting high-quality looks.
Absolutely. And I think this team is going to be good, and I think they are good enough to make the playoffs. The problem is, so are a lot of other teams.
Yeah.
And it's such a crapshoot. It could go so many different ways, but I think the Suns put themselves in a good place.
Agreed.
So those are my final thoughts on the Suns, but do you have anything else before we cut?
Once again, shout out to my man, Irving Rowland. Keep up the great work, buddy. I'm rooting for you guys.
Right on. So that concludes our 2014-15 Phoenix Suns NBA team preview. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. Leave a comment maybe saying why, or maybe how you feel about guys like Goran Dragic and Isaiah Thomas and Eric Bledsoe. As always, there's a subscribe button down below if you want to be notified of our future team previews, or maybe even you can check out our channel to go back and watch some of our older ones. So I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching. All right. Peace out, guys. It's been a blast.
Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.